Courtenay-Alberni.
Yeah, Madam Speaker, I'm coming to you tonight in reference to a question I asked on April 10th, where I was calling on the government to honour their commitment around the Truth and Reconciliation calls to action, Madam Speaker, around Indigenous languages. And Madam Speaker, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about a legend, O Hakum, which means in references to a lady of high standing. Really, it means a queen in Nuu-chah-nulth language. Because last month, Madam Speaker, the Nuu-chah-nulth people lost Tupat Mit, whose English name was Juliet Lucas. And she was predeceased by her partner in life, Simon Lucas, who was like her, a great leader of their people and for all Indigenous people, not just Nuu-chah-nulth people, but across British Columbia and Canada. Tupat Mit honored me with the name Yaxaxis, which means one who walks amongst us, and has provided me with advice and guidance over the years. And I want to thank her family and her for the name. She'll be greatly missed by all those who loved her and by the many for whom she made a difference in their lives. Madam Speaker, Tupat Mit was one of only a few fluent speakers of Heshkwit dialect of the Nuu-chah-nulth language. She began teaching in the elementary school at Hot Springs Cove 40 years ago with very few resources and much less time. She taught the Heshkwit language to the children with just a half hour a day allocated to cultural education. With 3 other fluent speaking elders, she worked in the final years of her life to mentor young apprentices to pass on the language to the next generation. Her life's work will inspire others to carry on because future generations depend on it. For Tupat Mit knew there is nothing more important to the health and social well-being of Indigenous people, their families, their communities, their economies, and their spirit than the survival of their language. Madam Speaker, in follow-up to that, across British Columbia, First Nations people are facing the loss of language holders like Tupat Mit. And there is an urgent need to invest in language revitalization before it's too late. In British Columbia, nearly 2/3 of fluent speakers are older than 65, and 7 languages have only 5 or few speakers left. First Nations have fought to keep their languages alive, and between 2018 and 2022, there was a 20% increase in the number of people learning their language in BC. But while the number of language learners is growing, the number of remaining fluent speakers is falling, as I outlined when I talked about Tupat Mit. There is grave concern that the progress made in recent years will be lost without urgent government support for Indigenous language programming. Now, however, instead of investing in language revitalization at this critical time, the actual federal government is cutting funding, Madam Speaker. The Liberals' new funding formula has actually led to a 60% reduction in funding for First Nations language programs in British Columbia. And that funding formula does not consider British Columbia's unique context. As home to more than half of Indigenous languages in Canada, and across the province, 204 First Nations, there are 36 unique languages and more than 95 dialects. The First Peoples Cultural Council, a First Nations-led Crown Corporation working to revitalize First Nations languages in British Columbia, has written to the government about the funding cliff they are facing. This year's budget provided significantly less funding than previous years, and the drop in revenue has opened the door to the loss of hundreds of jobs, service cuts, and cancelled community programs. These cuts put the preservation and revitalization of First Nation languages and cultural heritage at risk.